Welcome to Latinos in Michigan. I'm your host, Liliana Ospina-Herseth. Today, we're going to talk about suicide and Michigan's largest conference on suicide organized by Kevin Sonth, a charitable organization dedicated to generating public awareness about the causes of suicide. Today is the first day of the beginning of Kevin Sonth's 5th annual virtual conference that will take place from January 21st to January 23rd. And we're going to talk about it with Leo Newhan. Leo, welcome to Latinos in Michigan, and please tell me about this organization, Kevin Sonth.
Well, Kevin Sonth is an organization that was started back in 2014 after the death of Kevin Urso. His parents, John and Gail Urso, wanted to do something to honor their son and to rectify what they perceived after his death as a gap in information that was available to people and families who lost someone to suicide. They discovered after Brian's death that while there were a lot of resources available, it was difficult to really find the right resource, the right kind of help. And so they thought that maybe they could start an organization that would do two things. Perhaps create some films, some documentary films about suicide in order to raise awareness. And also the idea of a conference. And the idea for the conference was to bring together experts in the field, researchers, mental health professionals, clinicians, educators, and people who have struggled with suicide themselves or with loved ones who are plagued with feelings of self-harm. They wanted to have a place where all these people could come together and share ideas and network and learn and collaborate in order to again raise awareness, reduce the stigma, and to engage in some real positive efforts to curb suicide. So Kevin Sonth has, this is our 5th conference, and we are the largest conference in the state that's dedicated to suicide prevention. And right now in the state of Michigan, it's a real opportunity for some positive change when it comes to suicide prevention in the state. And so our conference falls at a good time because there's a lot of activity in Lansing and around the state in an effort to, again, raise awareness.
I was reading a few weeks ago about the statistics regarding white males. White males had the highest statistics on suicide, more than any other, community.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon that I mean, the researchers and people who study these things, they can give us all kinds of rationale and try to explain it. But the reality is that, number one, white males comprise a very large portion of the society, of the community. Number two, they're in many ways involved in jobs that are very high stress positions. And another thing to remember is that white males oftentimes have access to firearms and other means of self-harm. And so when you put the stress and sometimes the feeling of isolation, economic devastation, relationship devastation, for veterans and active military, sometimes when those men are come off of a deployment, they have a hard time reacclimating to society. They struggle with finding work that's fulfilling and meaningful. Sometimes their family relationships have been strained because of their absence and because many of them have PTSD and other kind of military-related afflictions. And so when you put all those things together, it results in a higher rate of suicide among working-age men, white men in particular. interestingly, there are other communities like the Latina community, which doesn't have as high a rate of suicide. And there are different kind of reasons that people speculate might influence that. One being just a very high, the high importance in that community of religion and of family. So it's cultural in some respects, but there is some evidence that would suggest that a very strong religious kind of anti-suicide value will in some people act as a deterrent for their consideration of suicide. They may engage in other activities that are self-destructive, like, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, and so on. But because there is such a taboo religiously attached to suicide, communities that are very religiously based and religious centric often have lower rates of suicide.
That's very interesting that you mentioned that, because I'm Colombian. I grew up Catholic. I became a Protestant probably 16, 17 years ago. But in my culture, as many Hispanics, I remember if somebody related to us or a friend committed suicide, the immediate thought or the immediate comment of the family, oh my God, he's going to hell.
Right.
And that's something very, very, important when it comes to religion to the Hispanic community, because you don't want to go to hell, And that's very interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's a very strong deterrent. Not absolute, because obviously there are still Hispanic people that choose or are compelled to take their own lives, but not in the kind of numbers that you see in the white community as a whole. And even in the Black community, the rate is not as high as it is among white males. So, so there are many different factors that play into it. And so our conference this year is an attempt to examine suicide in the context of these different communities that we have here in the state of Michigan. So we're going to be focusing on the Black community. We're going to be focusing on the Hispanic community. We're focusing on the gay, lesbian, the LTGB community. We're focusing on the indigenous people, the Native American community, because all of those communities have their unique issues and unique differences that have had an influence on the rates of suicide. And in general, the rates of suicide are increasing, despite all of the efforts of all of the organizations throughout the country. The suicide rate is not going down. And now with the impact of the worldwide pandemic, many mental health professionals are fearful that we will see a spike in suicides because of the impact that the pandemic is going to have on families, on individuals. A lot of people are just scraping by. And when the economic reality and hardship hits them and hits them hard, oftentimes people feel like they have no hope, they have nowhere to turn, they have nowhere to go, and they think that death is the only solution. So it's a sad reality, but it's one that the pandemic has created, and the mental health profession in general is trying to equip itself to help people through the aftermath of this pandemic.
And that's so true with the pandemic. A lot, there is an increase in domestic violence, alcoholism. But another problem is the psychiatrist shortage in this country, which is another barrier to treatment for many people.
I guess part of the problem too is there are a couple things. Number one, a lot of times people from communities like the Hispanic community or the Black community they want to see somebody, they want to see a mental health professional, number one, that understands them, understands their culture, understands their, their background. And so there's no question that we don't have enough mental health professionals who are Hispanic, who are African American. We need more because there are communities here that I think would benefit from mental health services, especially if they felt that those services were being rendered by people who understand them and who can relate to them ethnically and culturally. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And in general, we don't have enough mental health professionals throughout the state of Michigan. And so that is an issue. And it's an issue of, there's such a stigma in, let's say, in the Hispanic community, there's such a stigma against seeking help that you have to kind of break that down first before you can have someone see a mental health professional. You first have to get over that hurdle of somehow feeling like it is wrong, or there's something just not right about getting help. That sometimes getting help is really needed. It's kind of like, maybe 25 years ago, people talked about cancer in the shadows. No one wanted to talk about it in the open. It was a word that no one wanted to utter because people were frightened and ashamed. Well, that's kind of how mental illness is today. It's still living in the shadows. It's better than it used to be, but we need to bring it out of the shadows and shine a spotlight on it so that people can be comfortable getting help. Because most people, if they're suicidal, if they can get to somebody that can help them through that episode, they generally will not attempt again. It's a funny thing. It's kind of like if you break that thought of suicide at the right time, if you can break through to that person, a lot of times that person will not try to commit again. There are many exceptions to that, and there are some people that repeatedly try to take their own lives, but there are many people who, if somebody intervenes effectively, can save their lives.
It's very interesting because many people don't know what you just said. They don't know how to get help either when they have a family going through a crisis like that. How does a person can get involved with your organization first, and also give me more information about the conference? Where are you guys gonna share the information? So I would love to share the conference in my platform, because Latinos in Michigan is a bilingual platform, and when I look at the statistics, a lot of people that follows me because I speak English and Spanish. So I would love to share the conference if I could, because a lot of people need help, especially right now with the pandemic.
Yes. Well, here's a couple of things. If you go to our website, which is kevinsong.org, they can register on our website. I will tell you that you can let your constituents know that if for some reason somebody would really like to attend the conference, but they just can't afford the cost of the conference. It's a virtual conference, meaning it's all going to be online, but we still have costs associated with it, and we still have to pay for some of the speakers and for the technology, and Detroit Public Television is producing this for us. So if there's anybody in your audience, any of your people that listen to you that would like to go, but the money is going to be an object, then they can reach out to me directly, and my email is leo, L-E-O, @kevinsong.org. They can email me, and my email is on the website, and I can make arrangements to get them registered with the scholarship. So just so you know that. I wouldn't want anybody who really wants to attend and learn about this. Maybe they have a family member that is suffering from depression or suffering from some other addictive kind of personality things, and they're worried about them. I wouldn't want that person to stay away from the conference because they can't afford it. So I would just pass that along to you, and you can share that with your listeners and your constituents.
Oh, thank you, Leo. And what will be the message that you will give to a family, a person that is going through a crisis, right now with the pandemic?
Well, there's a couple things. There are many resources within the state of Michigan. Where are you physically located? What part of the state?
I'm in Michigan. I'm in Howell, but I go everywhere.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm in Howell, but I go to Detroit. I go to Grand Rapids. I go to Battle Creek.
Okay.
I'm very mobile.
So I can tell you just off the top of my head, there is an organization in the greater Detroit metropolitan area called the Detroit-Wayne Integrated Health Network. Detroit-Wayne, they used to be called Mental Health Authority, but Detroit-Wayne is a good resource. They have a lot of people in the Detroit-Wayne organization that deal with the Hispanic community. There's another group in Kalamazoo called Griffin Place, Gryphon, and the director there is Mariciela Alcala. She is Hispanic, and she is actually speaking at the conference about the impact of COVID and suicide on the Hispanic community. And she's going to be joined by Adrian Vasquez, who is the executive director of El Concilio.
El Concilio.
Yes.
I know that place in Kalamazoo, El Concilio. Yeah. And her name is very familiar, so I probably know her.
Yes. Well, Mariciela is wonderful. She's very active at a state level about suicide prevention. And because of her own ethnic background, she is very, very familiar with the impact of COVID and of suicide on the mental health of people in the Hispanic community. So the Griffin Place in Kalamazoo would be another good resource. Those are just two of many, but there's also a suicide prevention hotline. And you may have heard there's going to be a new 3-digit number. I think it's 988 that is going to be rolled out nationally as a suicide helpline. But for the time being, we have to use the old hotline number, and that's 1-800-273-8255. So if you have somebody in your family that you're really worried about, maybe they haven't tried to take their life, but you're just worried about them, you can call that hotline. They will connect you with somebody right in your area who can walk you through what to do, what to look for, and how to help that person, and give you resources so that you'll be ready if anything escalates.
Thank you for watching us, and do not forget to like our Facebook page, Latinos in Michigan TV. See you next time.